Coming up next on the Cinefile.
I wonder if they show Shawshank in prison. You think they do?
No. It's too inspirational. And welcome back to the Cinefile, the podcast celebrating cinema one film at a time. Each week, my co-host Jake Biller and I break down a film, discussing anything from mise en scène to scenes you missed. Today, we talk about Shawshank Redemption, one of the greatest films of all time. And it was my pick this week. This is actually my birthday episode.
I know. I when we made the schedule, I had to give you this pick today because I was like, it's his birthday. Surprise, this is what I got you for your birthday. So don't expect anything else because I'm broke.
I decided, you know what? I want to watch Prison the movie. And that's what this movie is. And just
happy birthday.
All right, happy birthday. But I hadn't seen this in a while, but it's so iconic. It's one of the greatest films ever made. Yeah, I sat down to watch it and it holds up. It really does hold up. And there are a couple things that I'm excited to talk with you about, but I want to hear some opening thoughts from you. What are your opening thoughts on Shawshank Redemption?
Yeah, this is a movie I've seen quite a bit, I think, but it's one of those that I think I've heard Rich Eisen describe it as the remote drop, where you're flipping channels, you're channel surfing, and then you see this is on and you just drop the remote. Like there's certain movies that you just like, oh, you see it's on, whether it's started 5 minutes ago or you got 5 minutes left, like you're going to stop and watch it because it's that good. And this is one of those movies. And I feel like this is the first time in a long time I've actually watched it from beginning to end. Just because it has that it's that remote drop nature for me. So it was interesting seeing the whole experience or the whole movie, if you will, because I don't want to say I forgot about parts, but there are definitely parts that are more familiar to me than the rest of it. But I definitely agree. You know, it's known as one of the greatest movies of all time, and it definitely holds up. It's based off of a Stephen King. It wasn't a whole book. It was just like a short story or a novella. Monograph. You are not Paul Hunnam.
We're referring to The Holdovers, which
yes.
We're going to talk about in our Oscar special. I really enjoyed that movie. I've seen it now 4 times. But back to Shawshank Redemption.
Yes.
The first thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was the score. The score of this movie is...
You want to talk about score?
It's composed by Thomas Newman, okay, who is related to Randy Newman, who did the Toy Story films. But Thomas Newman is known for having like a piano forward sound. And I'm obviously always reminded of The Judge, which we're going to talk about this year. But he does the score for that. He does a ton of different, very piano-focused scores. You can almost kind of tell if it's a Thomas Newman score. But I think the score in this movie shines.
Oh, definitely. I think this is a movie that is a lot about, as much as it's about being in prison, it's not about being in prison at the same time. And that may be kind of a hot take, but I think the core of its movie is about the relationships between people. It's really about the interpersonal relationships, especially between Andy and Red. You know, I can't remember reading up on this. I want to say it was I think it was Tim Robbins. I don't think I wrote it down. But he described it as one of the best non-sexual love stories put to film about the love between two men, being Andy and Red, which also, by the way, I had to dig out my Dufresne and Redding charter fishing shirt for this. It's a great shirt. I love this shirt so much. But really, to your point about score and what I'm trying to get at here is it's hard to put years worth of relationships into even a 2.5 hour movie. You know, these are relationships. We go from at the beginning of the movie, Red is really betting on Andy that he's going to crumble and succumb to the first night being in jail and be the first one to cry, to them being the best of friends, right? And so it's quite the growth in that relationship. And I think we've talked about it here on this podcast before, I know. I think that score is really one of, kind of our emotional roadmap for the movie. It communicates themes and emotions and feelings in a way that dialogue never could. And also dialogue shouldn't try to. Like so much of the human experience, I think, we communicate through body language, through facial expressions, and just, you can tell, you can really kind of tell what other people are feeling or kind of what the mood is in the room when you walk in, if you're really attuned and aware and looking for kind of the signals of that. So all that to say is, I don't want someone to sit there and try and explain all their emotions through dialogue. I think that makes for poor dialogue. So score is such an important building block in a movie that's at its core is about relationships. I think it's so important and so well done here that they have such a good score, and it really kind of is able to communicate a lot of things, especially as we see time pass, right? Their relationships grow and they grow as people. This time in prison. So, I think the score really stands out, and you're right.
Yeah. If you think about it, this movie is told from almost 3 points of view, right? We've got our visual storytelling in the film itself, the actual things that are being taken and put onto film. Then you've got the narrative, the narration on top of that. And then you also have the score. So what the score does is it's able to kind of connect, if you will. We're going to use a visual here. You're able to connect the beginning to the end of the story and make it believable, right? To kind of echo what you said, this movie hinges on the relationship between Andy and Red. And so when you have other elements that are kind of telling you how to feel about the relationship at any point in time. And I also think that Thomas Newman is chosen for a good reason, because Andy is very soft-spoken. And so you have this kind of soft piano score. I mean, it's powerful. It's a powerful score, but it's also soft. And so it really does a great job of mimicking Andy as a person, as a character. I mean, I think the through line for this episode is talking about the ways in which the story is told that isn't through a camera lens.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that this movie is known for is the voiceover narration by Red, Morgan Freeman's character. This was the first time that he did a role that was heavily had a lot of voiceover in it. So this is kind of the beginning of that. And I think he does it so well here. One, because Morgan Freeman is just an incredible actor, full stop right there. That would have been enough. But also I feel like the use of voiceover here is really, really well done in a way that a lot of other movies don't do it well. Right? Because it feels almost like this omniscient narrator in a way, but it's still rooted in a character. As omniscient as Red's voice seems in those voiceover moments, there are limits. There are a few times he says, I don't know if it was this or this, but X happened. As we're seeing the things happen on screen. So I think that's really giving Red. It would have been very easy to have Red be completely omniscient, but having that little veil, if you will, between the voiceover and what we're seeing on screen, it's almost like the audience almost feels closer to the story because Red is one of our main characters, and even we know more about Andy's story than Red does.
Sure. I mean, if you look at it from sitting on the back porch, having a beer and talking to somebody and learning who they are. I mean, that the narration, the way it's written, is very much like that, right? It feels like we are talking to Red. What really sells me on the relationship between these two guys is that voiceover narration, because it reminds me of all the times that I've told a story. Just the way in which it is written, the way in which it's performed, both of those things together, it just reminds me of when I'm telling a story. And so when I was watching it through this time, I was like, this narration is the key to this movie's success. If we don't have that narration, this movie doesn't work. If we don't have the score, this movie doesn't work. If we don't have the non-diegetic pieces, this movie doesn't work.
In a lot of movies where voiceover doesn't work, it's too much. It feels like we're being spoon-fed a story, but this is not that. We're not spoon-fed it. It's like you said, it's a recounting of, of a person's or two people's lives together, right? This is almost, it almost feels like I'm sitting on the boat with Red and Andy, and they're talking about their time in prison. But it's enhanced in the fact that I see it play out in a visual way on a screen. You know what I mean?
Yes. I also like the fact that we as the audience don't know for the longest time if Andy actually killed his wife or not. That, I think, is critical to our understanding of the Andy character.
Interesting. Because that's really interesting that you say that, because if I have an issue with this movie, I almost feel like it's too clear that Andy didn't do it. Tim Robbins isn't one to usually play someone who would kill his wife, even if his wife was cheating on him with the golf pro. I don't know. Because you're right. We don't see it happen, but there's something. You know what it is? I think it's the way this movie starts.
Okay.
The beginning, going back to kind of what I alluded to at the beginning, this is the first time in a long time I had sat down and watched this all the way through, beginning to end. I think the weakest part of the movie is the very beginning. I think until we get Andy to Shawshank, I don't know. I think that's the weakest part of the movie. It feels out of touch with the rest of it. Or should I say the first time we see Shawshank, because Red's first parole hearing is the first time we go to Shawshank, and that's our first introduction to Red. And I don't know. I feel like I would have just rather the movie begin there, because we begin with Andy sitting in his car drinking with a revolver, and we think he's going to go kill someone, but then we never see him do it. But then he's on trial. So I don't know. I think it's the fact that we see the moment right before and the result of Andy, or the fact that we see Andy's wrongful conviction, the fact that we cut from there to there, it seems to suggest, I don't know, to me, and maybe, like I said, maybe it's because I don't believe that Tim Robbins could play someone who killed his wife. It seems to suggest to me, watching it, that Andy is innocent and that he's wrongfully convicted.
My question then is, what is the meaning? What is the purpose of this movie? What is the message of the movie to you? And the reason why I asked that is because for me, the message that I got was that sometimes you don't need to be rehabilitated. Because we start off and we see, we kind of see the message of the movie is a rehabilitation. Because we start off, we see he's drinking and he's got the gun and all this. And then we also have Red, who starts off where they're asking, have you basically turned a corner, right? Are you rehabilitated? We start and end the movie with that question. Are you rehabilitated, from Red? And so to me, I think this movie is about a character and a wrongfully convicted character, and how he doesn't, it's almost like he's reverse rehabilitated, right? He talks about, he said, I was I was squeaky clean on the outside, and then I finally knew how to be a crook once I got to prison. And then also we see the warden and Mr. Krabs and Clancy Brown. We see the warden and Clancy Brown are corrupt.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's this commentary on corruption, and that actually the most corrupt people are the people that are in the prison.
It's a movie that one questions what, who is good and who is evil, and who are we to say which is which? Is there a true good? Is there a true evil? Blah, blah, blah. But also, I think in a more focused way, it asks, what does it mean to be rehabilitated, right? Because if you look at the criminal justice system, ideally, what is, in an ideal world, what is it supposed to be? It's supposed to be this system that takes bad people who have done bad things, punish them for their crime, and turn them back into good people who can function in society. With the exception of Red, the people that are let out are not rehabilitated. Obviously, you talked about the warden and Captain Hadley. We have those two characters who are supposed to be the tools of justice, if you will, the ones that are supposed to punish and rehabilitate these prisoners, these criminals, and they punish them, but they don't rehabilitate them. This movie is showing, what separates, what separates the warden and Captain Hadley from the prisoners, except the clothes they wear. There's nothing that separates them, their actions. If we go based on actions in this movie, it should be reversed, right? They should be the ones in prison, and and Red and Andy and Brooks and Haywood should be out. But speaking of Brooks, he is let out of prison, but he's not rehabilitated, right? He has done his time for whatever his crime that he committed was. He has paid his service to society, his debt to society, but they didn't rehabilitate him because, he's a good person. I don't think he's still the same person. I can't remember if he's in for murder or what. But he's not the same person that committed that crime all those years ago when he first got locked up. Morally, physically, whatever. He is a completely different person. But they've not made him a functioning member of society again. He takes his life because he doesn't know how to function in this society that he's been turned loose in. The system doesn't work. I think in this instance, in this prison, in this structure, in this story, it doesn't work. And so I think that's the question it grapples with is, what does it mean to be rehabilitated? And can people be rehabilitated? And what separates good and evil? This may be a hot take. I may be kind of way out of left field, but I want to get your take on this. And this is a thought. I've always felt this way watching this movie, especially towards Andy, but I've never been able to put it into words until this conversation, I think. Does Andy seem like a Christ-like character to you? I mean Christ-like in the fact that he is the one in prison that is innocent, but yet he is condemned with the rest of the criminals. But by his presence there, he makes these prisoners better people. Right? Because like you said, Red is not I wouldn't say Red is a bad person at the beginning of the movie, but he is a very cynical and I would say a very selfish person, right? He gets things for people, but only to make money and cigarettes for himself, and he looks out for him and his friends, but poo on you to whoever else you be if you're not in his inner circle. But Andy makes him into a better person, right? Andy makes Haywood into a better person.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that he is a Christ-like figure. That the whole idea, wow, this got real interesting real quick. Yeah, you drop that light into the darkness and it lets others shine.
Yeah.
Right. And while he's definitely not Christ, right? He's not perfect. It's the same effect. It's the same effect of you're taking somebody who he himself knows he's innocent and he's getting beaten up inches between his life. He's been thrown in the hole for absolutely technically there are reasons, but just because he wanted to play music over they're not just reasons. And which I didn't catch until this last time, was essentially getting raped like all the time. And I guess last time I watched that sequence, I must have been young enough or aloof enough that I didn't realize that's what was going on. But you're absolutely right. And he's also taller than a lot of people, which isn't really necessarily relevant, but he kind of stands above the rest. And so, yeah, he gets this special permission, but at the same time, he takes the beating for everybody. And then we see how the people's lives change. Specifically, and we're going to play this clip of the scene in the movie where they're up on the roof, tarring the roof. Take a look at this.
Who's the truth? The man never gets a break. That's the truth. You said Rich getting himself killed.
Keep talking. No.
Some brother. Shit.
Hey! Mr. Hadley, do you trust your wife?
Oh, that's funny. You're gonna look funnier sucking my dick with no teeth.
What I mean is, do you think she'd go behind your back, try to hamstring you?
That's it. Step aside, Mert. This fucker's having himself an accident.
You don't push him off the roof. Because if you do trust her, there's no reason you can't keep that $35,000.
What did you say?
35,000.
35,000?
All of it.
All of it?
Every penny.
You better start making sense.
If you want to keep all that money, give it to your wife. The IRS allows a one-time only gift to your spouse for up to $60,000.
Bullshit. Tax-free?
Tax-free. IRS can't touch 1 cent.
You're that smart banker what killed his wife, aren't you? Why should I believe a smart banker like you? So I can end up in here with you?
It's perfectly legal. Go ask the IRS. They'll say the same thing. Actually, I feel stupid telling you this. I'm sure you would have investigated the matter yourself.
Yeah, fucking A. I don't need no smart wife-killing banker to tell me where the bear's shitting the buckwheat.
Of course not. But you do need someone to set up the tax-free gift for you. And that'll cost you. A lawyer, for example.
Bunch of ball-washing bastards.
Right. I suppose I could set it up for you.
So, in this scene, there's this kindness about Andy that the guard is caught, or the Hadley's caught off guard, right? He's about to throw him over. Then Red and everybody else stop. You know, it's just like this really interesting scene, and I think this perfectly encapsulates what we've been talking about and what you brought up about him being this Christ-like figure.
Let's go, work!
And that's how it came to pass, that on the second to last day of the job, the convict crew that tarred the plate factory roof in the spring of '49 wound up sitting in a row at 10 o'clock in the morning, drinking icy cold Bohemia-style beer, courtesy of the hardest screw that ever walked a turn at Shawshank State Prison.
Drink up while it's cold, ladies.
The colossal prick even managed to sound magnanimous. We sat and drank with the sun on our shoulders and felt like free men. Hell, we could have been tarring the roof of one of our own houses. We were the lords of all creation. As for Andy, he spent that break hunkered in the shade, a strange little smile on his face, watching us drink his beer.
He sticks his neck out for the benefit of others, but not himself, right? You know, you see Haywood go and offer him a beer, and Andy says no. Like, the whole reason he approached Hadley,
you could argue,
as from what he said, was in reward. He just wanted 3 beers apiece for him and everyone with him. He could have easily said, I want a 6-pack, or I want this, I want, something for him. But he asked for a reward that included everyone, and then refused the reward for himself. Right?
Yeah.
That's Tell me something that's more like supposed to be more like Jesus than that. You look at Andy like in this scene, but also like throughout the rest of the movie, like there is something in the way that he's shot, in the way that like the scenes are blocked. Andy is made to stand out in the way characters talk about him, in the way that the camera looks at him, in the way that others just interact around him. He is made to stand out. And so it's like, I've always noticed that, but it wasn't like until our conversation here. And this is why I love doing the podcast, because it like, I'm like, I want to talk about this movie. There are movies, and I'm pretty sure next week we're doing Inherit the Wind, which like no one that's like not like at least 65 has seen that movie. So right. I've always wanted to talk about this movie with someone else. So I'm excited for that. But no, it's like, I didn't click until this moment that it's like, yeah, it makes sense. That's why Andy's set apart. That's why he's like made to look different, is because he's like this Christ-like character that's inserted into, like you said, all this darkness to bring light to those around him.
And I mean, and let's pull on this string further, right? If we think about the warden specifically and the Bible, the warden is very much a Pharisee, bringing dropping verses like they're hot. Like an absolute savage, coming in there, and he goes and he picks up the Bible that we find out at the end has been carved out so that he has that rock hammer thing in there. Yeah, absolute goat for that, by the way. But you know what he doesn't notice? That the Bible is a different weight, which might seem weird, and he doesn't open up the Bible at all. Right. But it almost shows his naivete and just brashness, that like he doesn't even realize that book isn't normal. So where are you getting these verses from? But the point is, he's pharisaical. He's just throwing he's operating, he's moving in hate. And specifically, Andy goes and then he uses the Bible itself and he kind of cuts it out. And that's why if you think about it, right, we're saying that he's like this flawed Christ-like character. So, you've got the Bible, but he uses it for his own gain in a way as well. So it's like this weird kind of meta commentary on that as well.
Yeah. To pull on that thread a little further, what's the book that Andy puts in the safe when he takes out the logbook? It's the carved out Bible. Like that's his last. He's returning the thing that the warden gave to him at the beginning, saying salvation lies within. And Andy like literally gave that to him to be like, "Yep, salvation did lie within." Here's where I hid the hammer.
And guess what? You're not getting salvation because you're going to prison now.
Yeah,
got him.
But then also, is it a verse or is it like a saying that's on that artwork that's on the warden's wall that his wife made in like some club or whatever? I can't remember what it says.
Yeah. So yeah,
but it's like a verse. I think it might be a Bible verse. It's either a Bible verse or like some kind of like Christian saying or whatever. I can't remember. But anyways, like to further point out the fact that the warden is not who he says he is, he uses that to hide the safe where he keeps the secret books.
Yeah.
He uses this facade of Christianity to hide his corruption. Literally. Yeah. Like, that's so smart. That's such smart filmmaking to like make that part of the set and like make that part of the story. That is such a small detail. But yet, when you really dig into this, it speaks volumes.
We've waxed poetic long enough. We're going to go into Rosebud and Thorn. Jake, I'm passing it off to you as I do every single week. What are your Rosebud and Thorn for Shawshank Redemption?
Rose, have to give one to Morgan Freeman. I think he is really the standout performance in this. I'm also giving one to Tim Robbins because he plays this character that's so unique and different. But in such a uncanny, like can't quite put my finger on it way. And so you obviously have to give one to him. Like if whoever played Andy sucked, like this movie sucks. Like no matter if you have Morgan Freeman narrating it, like if you had some schmuck in there, like this movie just sucked. So I have to give one to Tim Robbins, but especially Morgan Freeman. I think it's the best performance of the whole movie. I'm going to give one to Bob Gunton, who plays the warden. Really interesting villain. I know we didn't really get into it a whole bunch in this podcast, but like really, really interesting villain, and like is able to just do it so like he's so smooth and cold, yet you want to believe he's sincere at some points, and then like it flips it on its head. And really, really kind of you see him unravel at the end when he thinks like there's a threat to not his criminal empire, if you will, but like a threat to his authority and his power from Andy. I think that his kind of progression, we've talked about how this progresses and these characters grow over so many years. I think his progression is really interesting when you look at it too. So I'm going to give one to him. Clancy Brown, it was going to take a lot for someone whose voice I was always going to associate with the proprietor of the Krusty Krab to make me feel intimidated. But he plays one mean prison guard, excuse me. He's a bad mamma jamma. And, there, as much as I bring that Mr. Krabs idea into this, like, you see him beat up that fat guy at the beginning, and you're just like, this is. You know
what that guy's name is in the credits?
Fats.
Fat ass.
Fat ass.
That's literally his name in the credits. Like, I'm not even kidding.
Well, that's what they call him.
Yeah, that is.
But anyways, so he overcomes audience, which like is such a weird thing, like it's such a 21st century thing to talk about because this movie predates the SpongeBob. I'm pretty sure it predates Krusty
I don't know. The Krusty Krab's been around a long time.
They don't call it Krusty for nothing.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be a retirement home, and then Krabs bought it, and then turned it into the Krusty Krab, and it's a whole thing.
Man. Anyways, so yeah, gotta give a rose to Clancy Brown, and then James Whitmore, who plays Brooks. Brooks really stood out to me on this rewatch. He's not in a ton of the movie. I mean, I would say probably like maybe a third, maybe a touch over a third. I don't know. Maybe it's a half. He might be in half the movie. I'd have to go back and kind of plot out time wise how much screen time he gets. Anyways, but it's definitely not one of the per se memorable characters, or more memorable. Like you think of Red and Andy, and you think of the Warden, and you think of Clancy Brown's character. You don't necessarily always think of Brooks when you think about this movie. So I want to give a rose to him as well. Buds. I do have Buds. The dialogue, like I understand what they're going for because this is supposed to be a period piece. And so like I think they were trying to tap into like, oh, they talk a little differently, but there are a few turns of phrases that I'm just like, that ain't it. In that clip we watched when Andy, asks for a bucket of suds, or a bottle of, what is it? A bottle of suds, excuse me. A bottle of suds. Like, no one talks like that. And then there's one point, Card says he's going to go pinch a loaf when he's going to go take a shit. So, and that's when Andy turns on the music on the intercom. But like, listen, people might have talked like that back then. We don't have to remember that they talked like that back then. Pinch a loaf. Like, what? Are you going to go like... Are you going to go like...
harass some bread all day?
Are you going to go harass some bread?
Exactly.
So Anyways, it was phrases like that kind of took me out of the movie a little bit. So I'm going to give a bunch of dialogue. And then pacing is just a touch too slow for me, or maybe just a touch too long. Like going back to what we talked about earlier, I kind of want this movie to begin with Red, his first parole hearing, because for me at least, those first couple scenes with Andy doesn't give me a lot that I don't already get in the movie. You know what I mean? So I think, and like, obviously this is going to be, we're showing a passage of time, like we've mentioned multiple times in this podcast. It's going to take some time. You don't want that to be rushed. And I appreciate that. But I also feel like in that same breath, we could then, what I think are a couple unnecessary scenes at the beginning, we could cut those out to not run so long. And then I have no thorns. Because who could have a thorn about the Shawshank freaking Redemption?
For me, I got to give a rose to both. Well, actually, honestly, the whole like kind of main cast, right? Even some of the supporting. I mean, it's great performances down the line. Tim Robbins, Morgan Freeman, the Warden, Clancy Brown, and Brooks. All of them I agree with. Specifically, though, I think Morgan Freeman and the Warden gives honestly an unsung performance, because people always talk about Morgan Freeman in this. They talk about Tim Robbins, but they don't talk about the Warden. And I think he really does kind of steal the show, in my opinion, in his scenes. He is a different kind of villain, and you're right. We didn't really talk too much about that, but man, he gives a really good performance. The score, Thomas Newman, great score. I think it really works with this film and helps kind of tell the story in the way it needs to be told. And then also the writing. Dialogue in this movie is really good. I texted you and I was kind of joking about how like this screenwriter had to have had such a ball roasting everybody in this movie. Yeah. But I just think the dialogue, the way it's written, some of the monologues, I mean, bro or female, whoever was on their A game, I can't remember who.
Well, Frank Darabont wrote the screenplay. I mean,
did he really? Directed it.
Yeah.
Frank Darabont, he gets the rose.
They wanted someone else to direct it, but he was like, no, me.
Buds, I don't really have many issues with this movie. I really think it's that good. I mean, A lot of people put it as one of the top 10 greatest movies of all time. And how many thorns or buds are you going to have when it comes to that? But the question is for you folks, what are your rosebud and thorn? What have you thought of The Shawshank Redemption? Is it in your top 10 all time? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. We're going to move on to some final thoughts. Jake, what are your final thoughts on Shawshank Redemption?
Final thoughts. We've been saying it the whole time. You just brought it up. This is one of the greatest movies, arguably ever. I have to agree. It's definitely up there. Definitely in my top, at least 50, if not top 25 movies ever. Incredible storytelling, incredible acting. All around great movie. If you haven't seen this one, where have you been? Have
you been in prison?
See it.
Is that why?
Maybe. I wonder if they show Shawshank in prison. You think they do?
No. No.
If they did, they'd have to give a lecture about no rock hammers.
My final thoughts. This is a spectacular film. There are definitely some deep themes that honestly, I didn't even realize going into this podcast that we talked about. That was honestly really fun. It was a great conversation to have. There are plenty of pluses. I don't really see a minus. This is definitely a must watch if you love film. And even if you don't like film, this might help you enjoy film. So make sure to watch it and watch it all the way through. I know we both talked about how we kind of watch bits and pieces, but there is something that is gained when you watch an entire film from start to finish. If you like this video, hit the like button and ring that bell with the subscribe button to get all notifications on upcoming content. Jake, you mentioned it. We're talking Inherit the Wind next week. That's a movie that I have not seen, and it is your pick, so excited to do that. Make sure to follow us on social media, the Cinefile, both Jake and myself. For Jake Biller, I'm Ben Sparrow. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next week, and cut.